I was folding his shirts when I found the receipt. Princess Cruises? 2 passengers? Romance package? I'd been home that entire week with pneumonia. My name is Patricia. I'm 76 years old, and 6 years ago my husband of 45 years left me for a woman he met on a 7-day Caribbean cruise. I'm going to tell you exactly how I went from crying in an empty house to running a multi-million-dollar travel company, and why the journey there taught me more about myself than 4 decades of marriage ever did. But first, where are you watching from today? Drop your state in the comments. I love knowing where my stories reach. It was March 2019. Robert had been acting strange for months. More showers, new cologne. He'd started going to the gym at 70, which would have been admirable if he hadn't spent our entire marriage saying exercise was a waste of time. When he said he was going on a cruise with his college buddy Frank, I actually felt relieved. I thought maybe he needed space. Maybe we both did. I spent that week in bed with pneumonia, coughing so hard my ribs ached. My daughter Sarah called twice. Robert called once, a 30-second conversation where he sounded distracted. When he came home, he smelled like sunscreen and seemed lighter somehow, happier. I remember thinking maybe the trip had been good for him. 2 weeks later, I found the receipt in his jacket pocket. I wasn't snooping, I was doing laundry. The paper was soft from being folded and refolded. Princess Cruises, romance package, 2 passengers, upgrade to balcony suite, couples massage. The dates matched exactly when I'd been sick. I sat on the laundry room floor holding that receipt for an hour. 45 years. We'd met when I was 24, working as a secretary at an insurance company. He was 28, confident, charming. We'd raised 3 children, survived my mother's death, his father's alcoholism, our son's car accident. I'd given up my dream of opening a bookshop because Robert said we needed stability. I'd moved 6 times for his career. I'd made his dinner every single night for 45 years. When he came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the receipt in front of me. He looked at it, looked at me, and said 7 words I'll never forget. Patricia, I need to be honest now. Her name was Denise, 58, divorced, real estate agent from Phoenix. They'd met at the ship's cocktail hour the first night. She'd laughed at his jokes, made him feel young. He wasn't in love with her, not yet, but he wanted the chance to find out. He'd already rented an apartment. He'd see a lawyer next week. I couldn't speak. My throat closed up like I was drowning. All I could think was, he wasn't with Frank. There was no Frank. He'd lied to me while I was sick and alone, coughing until I tasted blood. Say something, he said. I looked at this man I'd slept beside for 45 years and realized I didn't know him at all. Or maybe I did, and I just spent decades pretending I didn't see who he really was. Get out, I whispered. He left that night. The first month, I barely functioned. I'd wake up at 6 out of habit, start making coffee for 2, then remember. The house felt enormous and suffocating at the same time. Our daughter Sarah came to stay for a week. She was furious with her father, wanted to confront him. I asked her not to. I didn't have the energy for anyone's anger but my own. The divorce paperwork arrived via courier. Robert was being generous. I could have the house, half his pension, alimony. His lawyer had drawn it all up already, efficient and cold. I signed everything. My own lawyer said I should fight for more, but I just wanted it over. I wanted to stop feeling like my entire life had been a lie. By month 2, the pity visits started. Friends from church brought casseroles and sad smiles. My sister called every day with the same questions. Was I eating? Sleeping? Had I thought about dating? Dating. At 70. After 45 years with one man who'd apparently been counting down the days until he could escape. One Tuesday afternoon, I was sorting through old photo albums, torturing myself, really, when I found pictures from the cruise Robert and I had taken for our 40th anniversary, 5 years earlier, the Bahamas. We'd argued most of the trip because he'd wanted to gamble and I'd wanted to explore the islands. Looking at those photos, I realized I couldn't remember the last time he'd looked at me the way he looked at the ocean, like something worth paying attention to. I closed the album and made a decision that everyone thought was crazy. I booked a cruise. By myself. 10 days through the Mexican Riviera, leaving in 3 weeks. Sarah was horrified. "Mom, you've never traveled alone. What if something happens? What if you get sick again?" "Then I'll get sick on a ship instead of in this house," I said. "Either way, I'll be alone." My friends were gentler but equally concerned. Solo travel at 70? What about safety? What would I do by myself all day? Wasn't I scared? Terrified, actually. But I was more terrified of spending the rest of my life in that house, walking past the spot where Robert told me he was leaving, eating dinner alone at a table set for 2 out of muscle memory. The 3 weeks before departure crawled by. I almost canceled twice. The night before I left, I stood in my bedroom with my suitcase half packed, crying so hard I couldn't catch my breath. What was I doing? I didn't know how to be alone. I'd gone from my parents' house to married life. I'd never even gone to a movie by myself. But the next morning, I put on the new dress I'd bought, turquoise, brighter than anything I'd worn in years, and drove myself to the port in Long Beach. My hands shook as I pulled my suitcase from the trunk. The ship loomed ahead, massive and white and impossibly beautiful. I stood there on the dock, watching families and couples stream toward the gangway and thought, you can turn around, go home, stay safe. Instead, I picked up my suitcase and walked toward the ship. That walk changed everything. The first 2 days, I barely left my cabin. It was small, but comfortable, a window looking out at endless ocean. I'd ordered room service, sat on the tiny balcony, and watched the water. Part of me felt ridiculous. I'd spent $2,000 to hide in a floating hotel room. On the 3rd morning, I forced myself to go to breakfast. The dining room was enormous, full of families and laughing couples. The hostess led me to a small table by the window, a table for one. I'd never felt more exposed in my life. Everyone seemed to be staring at the old woman eating alone. Halfway through my omelet, a voice said, "Mind if I join you? All the other tables are full." I looked up. He was maybe 75, tall, with silver hair and kind eyes. He wore a crisp white shirt and had the posture of someone who'd spent his life being listened to. "Of course," I said, grateful not to be alone. His name was James, retired CEO of a tech company I'd actually heard of. Widower. His wife had passed 3 years earlier, and his daughter had finally convinced him to stop working 80-hour weeks and actually live a little. This was his 4th cruise since retiring. 4th? I said. I'm barely surviving my 1st. He smiled. Solo travel? Divorced. Recently. Well, 6 months ago. It feels recent. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it. That's harder than losing someone to death, I think. Death doesn't make you question everything. We talked through breakfast, then somehow kept talking as we walked the deck. James had this way of asking questions that made you want to answer honestly. He didn't offer advice or pity. He just listened. I told him about Robert, about the receipt, about folding laundry when my marriage ended. I told him things I hadn't told my own daughter, about how I felt invisible, how I'd spent 45 years supporting someone else's dreams and now didn't know what my own were. So what did you dream about? He asked. Before you got married. What did 24-year-old Patricia want? No one had asked me that in 50 years. I wanted to open a bookshop, I said, with a cafe, one of those places where people could spend hours reading, drinking coffee, talking about stories. I'd saved almost enough money when I met Robert. He said it was too risky, said I should keep my steady job, so I did. James nodded slowly. Do you still read? Every night. It's the only thing that kept me sane these past months. Then you haven't lost it, he said. The dream. It's just been waiting. We spent the rest of the cruise together, not romantically, just as friends. We'd meet for breakfast, explore ports together, sit on the deck at sunset talking about everything. James told me about building his company from nothing, about losing his wife to cancer, about his daughter who thought he worked too much but didn't understand that work had been his way of not drowning in grief. On the last night, over dinner, he said something I wasn't expecting. "I have a proposition for you," James said, setting down his wine glass, "and I want you to really consider it before you say no." We were at the ship's upscale restaurant, a splurge on my part for the final night. The ocean stretched dark outside the windows, glittering with moonlight. "I'm listening," I said. "I've been thinking about starting a travel company, specifically for seniors. Luxury experiences, curated tours, cruises designed for people our age who want adventure but also comfort. Real concierge service. None of this shuffling hundreds of people on and off buses like cattle." He leaned forward. "The senior travel market is enormous and growing, but most companies treat us like we're fragile or simple. I want to create something different." "That sounds wonderful," I said. "You'd be good at that." "I would, but I don't want to do it alone." He paused. "Patricia, you have something I don't. You understand what it feels like to start over when you thought your life was finished. You know what women our age want because you are one. And you have taste. I've watched you these 10 days. The way you notice details, talk to people, find beauty in small things. That's what this business would need." My heart started pounding. "James, I don't have business experience. I was a secretary 40 years ago. I raised children. I've never—" "You've managed a household, raised 3 humans, supported a husband's entire career. You think that's not business experience?" He smiled. "I'm not offering you charity. I'm offering you a partnership, 50-50. I'll handle operations and finance. You'll handle client relations, experience design, the human side. We'll build it together." I stared at him. "You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you're smart, resilient, and you notice things. I know you took your first solo trip at 70 after your husband abandoned you, and instead of hiding in your cabin the whole time, you showed up. That takes courage." He pulled out a business card, slid it across the table. "Think about it. No pressure. But Patricia, I've built 3 companies in my life. I know a good partner when I meet one." I picked up the card. "James Chen," it read. "CEO, Chen Technologies." His personal cell number was handwritten on the back. "I live in San Diego," I said weakly. "I live in La Jolla, 20 minutes away." That night, back in my cabin, I couldn't sleep. I kept turning that business card over in my hands. It was insane. I was 70 years old. I didn't know anything about running a company. I'd signed my divorce papers 6 months ago. I should be figuring out how to live alone, not launching a business. But then I thought about Robert, comfortably settled in his new life with Denise. I thought about the bookshop I'd never opened, the dreams I'd filed away, the decades I'd spent being careful, sensible, small. I picked up my phone and texted the number on the card. "When can we start?" James replied in seconds. "Tomorrow. Come to my office Monday, 10 a.m. Bring ideas." I couldn't stop smiling. James's office in La Jolla overlooked the ocean. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, walls covered with photographs from his travels. When I arrived Monday morning, he had coffee waiting and a whiteboard covered in notes. "I couldn't sleep," he said, grinning like a kid. "I've been brainstorming for 3 days." We spent that first meeting dreaming. James wanted to offer all-inclusive luxury cruises, curated land tours, even adventure travel for active seniors. I suggested we focus on women first, specifically women traveling solo or in small groups. Women like me who wanted to feel safe and seen. "The women's market," James said slowly, writing it on the board, "that's brilliant. Underserved and growing. Women outlive men. They control wealth. They want experiences. And they're tired of being treated like they're invisible," I added, "or fragile, or done with living." That became our mission, creating travel experiences where women over 60 felt celebrated, not sidelined, where adventure didn't mean roughing it and luxury didn't mean stuffy formality, where you could be 70 and still try ziplining in Costa Rica if you wanted, with excellent medical support standing by just in case. We registered the business in April, Renaissance Travel Company. James insisted I be listed as co-founder and equal partner. He set up the LLC, the business accounts, the legal framework. I started researching, calling cruise lines, hotels, tour operators, learning the industry from the ground up. My children thought I'd lost my mind. "Mom, this is a huge risk," Sarah said when I told her. "You just got divorced. You should be focusing on yourself, not starting a business with a man you met on a cruise." "I am focusing on myself," I said, for the first time in 50 years. My son Michael was more direct. "Is this guy legitimate? Have you had him checked out? This could be a scam." I had, actually. James Chen was exactly who he said he was. Former CEO of a successful software company, widowed 3 years ago, no criminal record, excellent credit, respected in his industry. He was offering me an opportunity, not running a con, but I understood their concern. From the outside, it looked reckless. 70-year-old divorcee goes on a cruise, meets a man, starts a business. It sounded like the beginning of a cautionary tale. Except it wasn't. James and I worked 12-hour days that first month. We visited cruise ships, interviewed tour guides, taste-tested hotel restaurants. James taught me to read spreadsheets and profit margins. I taught him to think about the small details that make people feel cared for, the texture of towels, the height of beds, whether there are handrails in the right places. We argued sometimes. James wanted to scale fast. I wanted to start small, get it perfect. He thought my ideas were too expensive. I thought his were too impersonal. But we always worked it out because we both wanted the same thing, to build something meaningful. By June, we had our first tour booked, a 2-week cruise through the Mediterranean, limited to 30 women, all over 60. Full concierge service, shore excursions designed by us, nightly gatherings to share experiences. And I was terrified it would fail. The week before our first tour, I barely slept. What if no one came? What if they hated it? What if I'd convinced James to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in an idea that only worked in my imagination? James was calm. "Patricia, we have 28 women booked. The tour is full. We have a waiting list. Stop catastrophizing." "But what if it's amazing?" he interrupted. "What if we've created exactly what these women need and they go home and tell everyone? What if this is just the beginning?" I wanted to believe him. The tour departed from Barcelona. James and I flew out 3 days early to finalize details. I checked every cabin, walked every excursion route, met with every guide. I rewrote the welcome packet twice. James finally took the papers from my hands and said, "It's perfect. Let them experience it." The women arrived on a Saturday. 28 travelers from across the country, teachers, nurses, a former judge, 2 doctors, a retired Air Force colonel. Ages 61 to 79, some traveling solo for the first time, some widowed, some divorced. One woman, Linda, told me she'd left her husband of 40 years 3 months ago, and this trip was her celebration of freedom. That first night, we gathered on the ship's private deck for a welcome dinner. I stood at the front, hands shaking, and looked at these women who'd trusted us with their time and money. "Welcome," I began. "My name is Patricia. 18 months ago, my husband of 45 years left me for a woman he met on a cruise. I was 70. I felt invisible and used up. I took a cruise alone to prove I could still do hard things. That's where I met James, my business partner. Together, we created Renaissance Travel because we believe your best adventures aren't behind you. They're right now. This week is about being seen, being celebrated, and proving that life doesn't end at 60. It just gets more interesting." The women erupted in applause. Some were crying. Linda stood up and shouted, "Here's to starting over." That week was magic. We explored Barcelona's Gothic quarter, toured ancient ruins in Rome, wandered through Florence's art museums. Every excursion was paced for comfort, but packed with substance. Every evening, we gathered to share stories. These women opened up about divorces, losses, dreams deferred, and dreams newly imagined. They laughed until they cried. They made friendships that I knew would last years. On the last night, we held a farewell dinner. One of the women, Barbara, 73, recently widowed, stood up with her wine glass. "I want to thank Patricia and James," she said. "My husband died 2 years ago. My children treat me like I'm fragile. They don't want me traveling alone, trying new things. They want me safe and quiet. But this week, I ziplined in Corsica. I danced in a Barcelona nightclub. I remembered who I was before I was someone's wife and mother. You gave me myself back." If you've made it this far in my story, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. I share these stories because I know what it feels like to think your life is over. It's not even close. After that first tour, everything moved fast. The women went home and told their friends. We started getting inquiries, hundreds of them. By fall, we'd booked 4 more tours. By winter, we'd hired 2 full-time staff members and a travel coordinator. By the following spring, we were planning 12 tours across 6 continents. The business consumed me in the best possible way. I woke up excited. I spent my days solving problems, designing experiences, talking to women who wanted to travel but didn't want to do it alone. James handled operations and numbers. I handled everything that touched the clients. We made a better team than I'd imagined possible. My personal life stabilized too. I sold the house in Sacramento, too many memories, and bought a condo in San Diego with an ocean view. Sarah finally accepted that I wasn't having a breakdown, I was having a breakthrough. My son Michael even invested in the company. I didn't date. People asked, but I wasn't interested. I'd spent 45 years defined by a relationship. I was learning to be Patricia, not Patricia and Robert. That felt revolutionary enough. But Robert wasn't done with me yet. In March 2021, 2 years after he'd left, he called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Patricia," he said. His voice sounded older, tired. "I need to talk to you." "I'm busy, Robert. What do you need?" "It's about Denise. It's over. Has been for 6 months. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake." I sat down slowly. "I'm sorry to hear that. I've been thinking about us, about everything I threw away. Patricia, I know I don't deserve it, but I want to try again. I want to come home." Silence. I could hear him breathing, waiting. "Robert," I said carefully, "I don't have a home for you to come back to. I sold the house. I have a new life, a business, a purpose. I heard about the travel company. That's good. I'm proud of you. But Patricia, we can rebuild. We spent 45 years together. That has to mean something." "It does mean something," I said. "It means I spent 45 years shrinking myself to fit your life, making your dreams happen while mine gathered dust. You didn't leave me for Denise, Robert. You left me because you wanted to feel young and important, and I was the evidence that you were neither. So you traded me in. I never meant. I don't care what you meant. I care what you did. You lied to me while I was sick. You abandoned me when I was 70 years old. You made me feel worthless." I stood up, looking out at the ocean. "But here's the thing you didn't count on. I'm not worthless. I built something beautiful from the wreckage you left. I have a business partner who respects me. I have clients who thank me for changing their lives. I have purpose and joy and freedom. Why would I give that up for someone who made me feel small? Patricia, please. Goodbye, Robert." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from power. Robert tried 3 more times to contact me. Emails, a letter, finally showing up at my condo building. The concierge called up before letting him in. I told her to send him away. I didn't need closure from him. I'd built my own closure, one cruise at a time. The business kept growing. By 2022, Renaissance Travel was booking over 30 tours annually. We'd expanded beyond women-only trips to include co-ed adventures, specialty tours focused on art or food or history, but our core remained women traveling solo or in small groups. That's where my heart was. James and I had become genuine friends. We had dinner once a week to discuss business, but increasingly we just talked about life. He told me about his late wife, how grief had nearly destroyed him. I told him about realizing I'd never really known Robert, maybe never really known myself until I was forced to. "You know what's funny?" James said one evening. "People keep asking if we're dating." I laughed. "Sarah asks me that every month." "Are we?" he asked, smiling. "Dating." I considered it. James was kind, brilliant, shared my values. In another life, maybe, but no, I said. I love what we have. I don't want to complicate it. Does that sound terrible? It sounds honest. I feel the same way. He raised his wine glass. To being partners without being partners. To being enough on our own. In September 2022, we hit a milestone, our 100th tour. We celebrated by taking our entire staff, now 8 people, on a cruise through Alaska. It was a thank you for their work, but also a reminder of why we did this. Travel changed people. It opened them up, showed them they were capable of more than they'd imagined. On that trip, I met a woman named Joyce, 74, recently divorced after 50 years of marriage. She'd booked the tour on her daughter's insistence, but looked miserable when she boarded. "I shouldn't be here," she told me the first day. "I should be home. This isn't me." "What is you?" I asked. She didn't have an answer. By the end of the week, Joyce was leading group hikes and making everyone laugh with stories from her nursing career. On the final night, she hugged me with tears in her eyes. "I forgot I used to be fun," she said. "Before kids, before marriage, I was the girl who said yes to everything. Somewhere along the way, I became the woman who was too tired, too old, too scared. You reminded me that person is still here." That conversation stayed with me. How many women had forgotten who they were? How many had spent decades being useful instead of being themselves? That's when I decided to write about my experience. James encouraged it. "Your story matters," he said. "Not just the business success, the personal journey. Women need to hear it." So I started sharing my story, first in blog posts on our website, then in interviews with travel magazines, eventually in speaking engagements. I talked about Robert leaving, about taking that first solo cruise, about building a business at 70. The response overwhelmed me. Women wrote to me from across the country, hundreds of emails from women who'd been left, widowed, or who'd simply woken up one day and realized they'd forgotten themselves. They thanked me for being honest, for not pretending divorce at 70 was empowering or easy, for showing that rebuilding was possible but messy and terrifying and worth it. One letter came from a woman in Florida named Anne. She was 68, married 42 years, and her husband had just asked for a divorce. "I don't know how to be alone," she wrote. "I don't know who I am without him. How did you do it? How did you survive?" I wrote back with the truth. I survived by taking the smallest next step, then another, then another. I survived by saying yes to one scary thing. I survived by building something new instead of trying to resurrect something dead. And most importantly, I survived by believing that my value wasn't determined by whether someone chose to stay. By 2023, Renaissance Travel had grown beyond anything we'd imagined. We'd served over 1,000 clients. Our revenue had crossed $3 million. We'd been featured in AARP Magazine Travel Plus Leisure and the New York Times. James and I had been interviewed together about building a business as septuagenarians. But the best part wasn't the money or the press. It was the women, the hundreds of women who'd traveled with us and come back transformed. The widows who'd found joy again, the divorcees who'd discovered strength, the women who'd simply been invisible for too long and had finally been seen. In June 2024, we celebrated the company's 5th anniversary with a special cruise. inviting back every woman who'd traveled with us in that first year. All 28 came. Some brought daughters or friends. We spent a week in the Greek islands, laughing and reminiscing and celebrating how far we'd all come. Linda, the woman who'd left her husband and called the first trip her freedom celebration, pulled me aside on the last night. "I need you to know something," she said. "When I booked this trip 5 years ago, I was planning to end my life after it. I figured I'd have one beautiful week, then go home and take pills. I couldn't see a future worth living." My heart stopped. "But this trip changed everything. You changed everything. You showed me that my life wasn't over, that I could build something new." I went home and started a nonprofit for women leaving domestic violence situations. I've helped 83 women in 5 years. None of that would have happened if you hadn't been brave enough to share your story. I couldn't speak. I just held her while we both cried. That moment crystallized everything. The business success was wonderful. The financial stability was a relief. But this, knowing that vulnerability had given someone else permission to live, this was why it mattered. I thought about 70-year-old Patricia, sitting on the laundry room floor with a receipt in her hand, thinking her life was over. If I could go back and tell her what was coming, the fear, the growth, the business, the women whose lives would intersect with hers, would she believe me? Today, I'm 76. Renaissance travel runs itself. Mostly. James and I have excellent staff, and we've stepped back to more advisory roles. We still design special tours together, still meet for weekly dinners, still argue about details like we did in the beginning. I live in my San Diego condo with floor-to-ceiling windows and an ocean view. I read every night on my balcony. I travel at least once a month, sometimes for business, sometimes just because I can. I've been to 42 countries since Robert left me. I've zip-lined in Costa Rica, learned to paint in Tuscany, hiked Machu Picchu. I've done things that terrified me and survived every single one. My children have come around. Sarah works with us now, handling our marketing. Michael still thinks I'm reckless, but he says it with affection now. My grandchildren think I'm cool, which delights me more than it should. Robert sends a card every Christmas. I don't open them anymore. Whatever he has to say isn't relevant to the life I've built. Denise is welcome to him, or whoever came after Denise. That chapter is closed. James is talking about writing a book about senior entrepreneurship. He wants me to co-author it. I'm considering it. There's something powerful about showing people that innovation doesn't have an age limit, that your 7th decade can be your most creative. Last month, a woman joined one of our tours. Her first time traveling alone at 72, recently divorced. She was terrified. I recognized that fear immediately. On the second night, over dinner, she told me her story. Her husband had left her for someone younger. She felt worthless, invisible, used up. I listened. Then I told her about finding the receipt, about that first solo cruise, about meeting James and building something I never imagined I could. "So it gets better?" she asked, tears in her eyes. "It gets different," I said. "Better. Requires work. It requires showing up even when you're terrified. It requires believing you're worth more than someone else's bad decision." She nodded slowly. "How did you stop being angry?" "I didn't," I said honestly. "I channeled it. I took all that rage and hurt and humiliation, and I built something with it. Every tour we run, every woman we serve, it's proof that he was wrong about me, that I wasn't the problem, that my value never depended on him seeing it." By the end of the week, that woman was laughing, making plans to take another trip, talking about maybe starting the pottery business she'd dreamed about 40 years ago. That's what I want people to understand. Robert leaving didn't ruin my life. It freed me to build one that was actually mine. The betrayal was real. The pain was real. But so was everything that came after. I'm 76 years old. I run a successful business. I've traveled the world. I've helped hundreds of women find themselves again. I wake up every morning excited about the day ahead, and I did it all without him. That's the justice. Not revenge, not him begging to come back. Just me, living fully, proving every day that I was never the problem. He made his choice. I made mine better.